Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for the Paying for College seminar. Um, College can be a really fun time in someone's life, but it is also very spendy. So, we will be teaching you how you may be able to afford it and set yourself up for future in your desired career field by getting that degree. My name is Alicia, and I will be your moderator tonight. So, a few housekeeping tips. You may have noticed that your cameras and microphones are off. We cannot see or hear you. So, if you would please put your questions into the chat. We will pause the webinar periodically to answer those questions, and we will answer them in the order that they come through in the chat. So you will get a pop-up also at the end of this survey and at the end of the webinar for a survey. And we actually really, truly appreciate your feedback because we do use that for our future webinars. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Alicia. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Members, non-members, friends, family, mom and dad, if you're in there, hello. My name is Anthony. I'm a member consultant and financial counselor for Affinity Plus. Privileged to be here with you this evening. Currently filming this from my office in the Bemidji branch, so shout out to any Bemidji members that are with us tonight. Really excited to talk about this. I know that this is probably a hot topic for a lot of families or prospective students. So whether you're a parent of a child that's about to go to college, or maybe they're just starting their junior or senior year, or maybe just someone that has kids that are in college and looking for additional tips, I hope that you find something that you can take practical from this and utilize for yourself. So again, if you guys have questions, please fire those into the chat. I will do my best to answer every single one of them to the best of my knowledge, or get you the resources to find those answers. So, and I do just want to say, hey, a lot of what we talk about here, we're going to try to keep it somewhat general because this is such a nuanced topic, and every single person in this webinar tonight is going to have a unique story that's very unique and individual to them. So the information we're going to cover is going to be rather general. If you have more specific questions, again, I'm going to try to answer those, but my advice to you is we hope that you take some pragmatic stuff from this that you can utilize for yourself, but still use this as kind of a springboard to continue to dig for more information if you have, you know, a unique family dynamic or just a unique situation in general, because every situation could affect kind of how you would go about paying for college for yourself or for your loved ones. So with that, we will start, I suppose. Just some learning goals for us, and I will tell you, the PowerPoint for me, I'm so used to talking with people in live, in real life, so I've always used PowerPoint as more of a roadmap for the audience to pay attention to, but also for me to just kind of have as a kind of a topic headboard. But it's here for you. I will kind of speak more anecdotally and just some real life examples too. But what we hope that you can take away from here is kind of understanding the investment that college is, but also recognizing some of the risks that come with it. We're going to discuss the different options available for paying for college, from financial aid, grants, and scholarships to some of the private options, and then learning how kind of all of that is tied together and calculated. And our hope is that kind of the big overreaching thing is that we can empower you to kind of approach this so that you're borrowing wisely if you need to borrow, and you're doing things as efficiently as possible. So let's just talk about college in general. I know a lot of us probably understand kind of the concept, but it should be viewed as an investment. Obviously, things have changed from when I was in school. It was just kind of a given that you graduate high school, you go to a four-year school. I would say that that's such an old school way of thinking, because I was 18 and I was just shipped off to college. I mean, obviously I wanted to go, but I had no care in the world about what I was going to do. So I ended up going for 5.5 years and spending way more money than I should have. And that's not a fault of my parents, or I mean, probably myself, but it was just kind of the way of the times. Now we have so much more information. We're learning about a lot of the mistakes that were made, but I really wish that I would have understood the viewpoint of like, hey, this is an investment in myself and my future. So when we look at it through that lens, we do start thinking of the financial ramifications. So we know that there can be increased opportunities if you can get a degree and get through college. We know statistically those that do have a degree will potentially have higher earning opportunities and potential. Obviously, that's probably correlated with the fact that a lot of the higher paying jobs are going to be specialized, and a degree is usually a requirement for a lot of these things. You think law, you think medical, you can think of a lot of specialty fields. Now, that's not to say that you need to go to college to earn a good income, but as a general rule, in a lot of these specialized disciplines and career fields, it is almost a requirement to get yourself a foot in the door. And the last point, the fulfillment, I think that that is probably correlated with the fact or the idea that those that go to college are going for their dream job or a specific thing. So like the old adage, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I think that would be correlated with just being satisfied with your career choice, assuming that you did end up going to get your degree in that dream field. That being said, with all of the great things that college can bring to us, we have to recognize the risk. We have to. And this is something that I think we're talking about. The overall theme today is going to be the more we can do up front and early, I think it's going to set us up for success in the future. I know that's such a cliche thing to apply to so many different things, but with this especially, like these are conversations, if you're a parent out there or you're a student or you're a freshman in high school or maybe you're in college, it's never too late to have these conversations. But I think if you can start having these conversations with your children, even as a freshman in high school, well before they're probably going to be applying to college, I think you're starting to ingrain that thought in their mind of like, hey, college is an investment. These are the things that we should be considering because the risks are definitely heavy. And if we ignore those and we just kind of send our kids off to school or we just put ourselves through school with no plan and understanding what we're actually signing up for, it could lead to a lot of stress in the most formative years of that person's life. So college is an investment, but it generally is only going to pay out those dividends or the reward if we graduate and earn our degree. And again, it's not to disparage those that go to school and end up, taking a different route, but generally when we go to school and we don't finish or we drop out or maybe we go for way longer than anticipated, those expenses are still there. Now, there's going to be exceptions to that rule, but generally we're going to go for 2 years and drop out. We still have to pay for those 2 years. And if we don't get the reward of the degree, we've incurred the debt without actually getting why we went to school in the first place. So we kind of get the worst of both situations there. So definitely like having that conversation with your son or daughter or just yourself of like saying, hey, let's be thorough and let's really do our due diligence to figure out what do we want to do. Let's have a plan. We don't need to know the first day of freshman year what we're going to be doing in 12 years, but we should have an idea of kind of what we're interested in, what path we want to take, making sure that our school choice and our major and all these things are kind of tied together and on pace and on the path of kind of what we're thinking of doing. As far as minimizing financial risks, parents, obviously, if you've gone to college and you're like me and you still have student loan debt, it's kind of frustrating because if I could go back in time, I would definitely redo so many things. But we know that that's kind of a huge contentious topic in America right now is like the student loan crisis we're hearing about. So for those that haven't entered that kind of part of their lives with their dependents, or if you're, again, a prospective student and you haven't yet incurred any debt, this is the biggest thing, obviously, when we think of student loan risk and college risk is the financial implications. So something as simple as school choice can have a big ramification because generally speaking, public schools versus your private entities are going to have a lot different cost barrier, right? So again, there's exceptions, but for the most part, a public university is going to be far less in total cost than a private university may. When it comes to financial aid, there are a bunch of ways that we can pay for school, and we'll get into that kind of the meat and potatoes of our conversation tonight. But generally, when we're thinking of having to borrow money for school, I want to kind of ingrain this in your brain that the federal student loan, so the unsubsidized or subsidized loans that we would get through completing a FAFSA, those are kind of the bread and honey of what we would want the bulk of our loan debt, if we have to take out loans, to be in, because it's going to offer us the best interest rate, best repayment options, etc. You could pay for college any litany of ways, and again, we're going to run the gamut of all those ways, but that should be kind of ingrained in your mind of like, the FAFSA is kind of the key to a lot of the most beneficial loan products if we're having to pay for college through borrowing. Course of study, again, too, is going to be a huge implication because if we know kind of what the starting salary would be for a starting job in our field, we should be able to kind of calculate what we're going to potentially pay as expense for the investment side. And if we're going to spend $160,000 for a 4-year degree, and we anticipate that our starting wage coming out of college is going to be around $50,000, I think that would be pause for a conversation of, hey, does that investment make sense for what we expect to earn? So definitely having that conversation of like, hey, where do you want to go? School choice is important, knowing what that cost could be. But then what are we going to get if everything goes perfectly and John or Jane get their degree in 4 years and they get it in what they want? Does the actual realistic salary expectation for where they'd be starting out match with kind of the expense it took to get there? Because I see it all the time in my job here at Affinity when we work with people in their 20s, 30s, even 40s that still have tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Just come to find out that they spend $100,000 on a career choice that they end up only making 30 or 40,000 or even less. and they're still paying on it, it's going to take them even more and more time to pay that off, right? Doesn't mean they made a mistake, but there's definitely probably things they would do differently if they could go back in time. So I'm going to kind of periodically stop. Alicia, if there's any questions right now that we could run through, please let me know. Otherwise, I can keep going.
Yeah, we've got one question so far. And they ask, does it pay to create a 529 plan if the student is a freshman in high school?
I think you certainly could do that. I think we have a 529 plan for one of our children, not the other. We kind of just did that immediately off the advice of a financial advisor we were working with. But I think the goal with that is, at least for our contributions early on, is that we hope that it's going to be much larger. Now, if you can contribute the maximum or whatever your plan is to contribute, I think you could make the argument that it would be worth it. I think that, we, with our other child, we're not going that route. We're going to just put funds into a different, savings vessel and just have access to that because we're unsure if our child is going to even want to go to college. For the record, I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, so we have quite a ways to go to that. Definitely with a 529 plan or any investment advice, if you're a member with Affinity Plus, certainly reach out to our investment advisors because they'll be able to speak specifically to your situation, what you're planning on contributing, kind of what your projection or goal is for the child. And they'll be able to offer you more, I guess, pragmatic advice specific to your personal situation. Big story short, I think it could be, but you definitely want to have more detail to answer that correctly for your situation.
Perfect. We've got one more question. This person says that I qualified for an unsubsidized federal loan, but can afford at least my first year without any aid. Is it wise to wait until my sophomore year to accept federal loans?
I think that's a question that is easiest answered of like, do you see value in not taking out the debt and paying your way, whatever that is, if that's through scholarships, grants, or if you have money saved versus borrowing that and paying on that later. The unsubsidized, we'll dive into that shortly. You're going to have interest accrue immediately versus the subsidized, which the government's going to pay the interest on that right away. So without knowing more detail, again, and I don't mean to like kind of talk my way out of answering your question, but it would be unfair to answer without knowing a little more detail. But as a general rule, if you can afford to pay it or you don't need the aid, I'm more on in line of going that route and not taking out the loan for that first year, especially knowing it's unsubsidized. You're going to be accruing interest while you're in school. Generally, people aren't paying on those. I mean, you could, but that's not usually what people do when they're still in school of paying on them. So you're having that interest accrue on that freshman year. Whatever you end up borrowing it, generally it would be $5,500 if that's your first year. That'd be the max that you could borrow for your first year. But I would say, without knowing more detail, I would say if you can pay your first way without borrowing it, that is where I would start you to try to plan to go forward with. So. Alicia, any other questions that just came in?
Not at the moment.
Okay, cool. Great questions. And we'll talk more on that unsubsidized and subsidized because there are exceptions. Again, we're going to keep it pretty general because we could go into the weeds on just the FAFSA stuff. We could spend 2 hours. I promise I won't monopolize your time like that tonight. But again, hopefully you take some of the general info and each of you are going to have very specific situations and very specific questions to those, and I want to do right by you. So I'm more than happy to reach out to people afterwards too and follow through and follow up on those as well. So let's talk about the financial aid options. They are vast, they are many. A lot of what we think of financial aid or not a financial aid technically would classify it as, but we're going to kind of go, I didn't stagger this directly of like best, next best, worst, etc. But I think you'll kind of get the theme of like, hey, these are the most optimal options to go with, and these are more suboptimal. I think there's a time and place for every option. But let's start with what I would view as the creme de la creme, the shining gold trophy as far as how we would pay for college, and one of the most underutilized ways that our students of today pay for college, and that's through scholarships and grants. And when we think of that, I know most of you probably know this, but that is money we are not paying back. So this is basically view that as a gift for your son, daughter, yourself, that you are getting to pay for your college. There are ways, and we see it with members here, where they were able to pay their entire way through school without incurring a penny of debt, all through scholarships and grants, and maybe paying some of it on their own. I know there's statistics that say there's like millions of dollars in America that go unclaimed with scholarships and grants each year, and it's likely true because I know, again, I graduated high school in 2009, so please don't do the math. I'm older than I probably look, but that was not even a thing we talked about, with the exception of maybe the 4 or 5 or 6, very smart National Honor Society kids that probably paid their whole way through scholarship and grants. The rest of me and my friends, it just wasn't even a thing that was talked about. So the good news with where we are today is I feel like it's more at the forefront with as far as preparation for college with our guidance counselors and just our educators in general, but it's still something that's underutilized, especially for kids that are already in college, maybe they're sophomores, juniors, or whatever in college. I think there's a misconception that they have to be incoming freshmen to apply for this. It's incorrect. So when you apply for financial aid, and when I say that, I'm talking about submitting a FAFSA, you're already going to be automatically kind of considered for the grant. We're going to deep dive a little more into the need requirement and the student aid index, but depending on your personal situation, your family situation, you may automatically qualify for the federal grant if your need is deemed to be a certain level, meaning it is expected that you're going to need more money than someone whose parents maybe make more or their situation's a little different. In addition to that, there are grants and scholarship options abound, and you can look through those through, I think a great resource, like I said, is the guidance counselor at your child's high school. That's a great place to start. But in your school district, your city, your county, your state, the colleges that you're looking to apply for, the disciplines that you're looking to go through. If you're someone that's a prospective education major and you want to be a teacher, looking through the different unions or nonprofits that are associated with that is a great place to start. The Affinity Plus Foundation, every year we have people come in not knowing that we do scholarships every year. So I cannot say this enough. This is the one thing that I think your son or daughter, or you if you're the student, never give up on looking for these opportunities. And you can Google these things too. I will tell you too, you're going to see some apps and sites that might charge you a fee to search for that. You do not need to do that. If you have a Money EDU account on our education center on our website, we do have a couple articles about scholarship searching. So definitely would be one that I'd plug for you to review after the webinar. But this is one of the most underutilized kind of ways of how our new students are paying for college, and it's free money. So if we can get our hands on that alleviates a lot of the potential stress moving forward. So again, this is just something I would have a conversation with your family about. Hey, let's spend a Saturday looking at opportunities. You can oftentimes, they'll usually have you write like an essay about, why you deserve the scholarship. And you can usually, they'll always ask you different things for each organization that's giving out, but oftentimes that same essay or same whatever they have you write can probably be used for all of those applications. Obviously, each individual grant and scholarship might have different requirements, but it can be a lot easier and streamlined than one might think when they first start out. So definitely, this would be the top priority for us if we're going to pay for school and try to get out as debt-free as possible. Next would be work study. So again, when we fill out our FAFSA, which is our free application for federal student aid, we're automatically going to be considered for work study. Now, this eligible students, it will depend on their need. This is, when you think of work study, I want you to think of on-campus jobs at the school you're attending or local nonprofits to that school that they're attending. I think there's a fair amount of pros and cons, but generally the wages that you are earning go towards the financial aid package that or the award that you were given, and go towards that school cost. And they generally get paid directly to the school. You still have to, if you're eligible, you still have to get hired. You still have to maintain employment. So it's not just a job that's waiting for you if you're eligible. You do have to still seek that job and get hired. But this is a good way for, especially I think of at Bemidji State where I went to school, a lot of student workers would get jobs in their discipline, like, PE majors would do stuff with physical education. So you might not be getting necessarily a wage that you're getting cash for. It's going to your debt or to your school costs, but you're also gaining experience, relationships with, potential mentors and important people in what you're looking to do. So I think there's more than just one benefit to that. I think the biggest criticism of the work study is you could make the argument that your son or daughter could find a job outside in the private sector while they're going to school, that they could make more money. Obviously, if they're getting that money, it's still on them to pay that directly to the school. But if you were, for some of the people out there that are like myself that want to overanalyze, like, well, if you're making $14 an hour through work study, you could go work at Walmart making $16 an hour. I think that's a fair criticism. The one thing that benefits the work study is that they're going to be more inclined to work around the school schedule versus, you know, the freshman that's taking 17 credits and might not be able to pull an 8-hour shift 2 or 3 nights a week. But again, this would be another kind of better option than some of the other ones we're going to get into. Education loans. I think this is obviously a vague umbrella, education loans, because they come in a wide variety. But specifically, let's talk about financial aid, or the federal financial aid. So this would be what we could be given or awarded through our FAFSA application. This would be federally backed loans that with interest rates that are fixed and set by Congress, unsubsidized and subsidized, which will, I think the next slide kind of discusses those differences. But this would be the best option is when it comes to actually borrowing funds. So, you know, when we think of, if we know we're going to need aid, we don't have cash sitting around to pay for school, and we know we're going to need to borrow, we would want to max out this sector first before we look at any other option. Obviously, we're still looking at grants and scholarships. That's kind of an ongoing process, but the FAFSA is where we want to start and max that out before we look at private options. So with the federal loan specifically, right now rates are generally around 6.25%, and I know for some of you that have already been to school, I think most of mine were in the 4 or 5% range. These are still better than most of the private loan options. Now, the big difference when we hear unsubsidized and sub, I'm going to refer to them as unsub and sub just for sake of ease. It's really in how the interest is paid. And like I said earlier to the question that was asked, the unsub loans, the interest is accruing the entire time that that student is in school. The subsidized loans, the government is paying your interest. So if you have a $5,000 sub loan, when you get out of school, graduate, you're 6 months after your repayment phase starts, it's still $5,000. So when we talk about kids that go to school for 6 years, they have unsub loans. That's where you have someone that borrows $20,000 in unsub, and when they get out of school, they have $35,000. So the first year or two that they're making their payments, they're just paying interest, and that's kind of a crux of when we hear the student loan crisis. A lot of that starts there. The other half is in the private loan market, but the subsidized loan is what we would want to max out to the best of our ability. Now, it is based on need, which is going to be in a few slides of like knowing not everyone is eligible for subsidized loans, but if we are, we want to max that out first. The unsub is still better than the private options, but the interest is going to accrue immediately when we take those out. Education loans for parents. I don't know that I would say that this is the next best option because I have my own personal opinions on this, which not to bore you with those, but this would be if you've heard of the Parent Plus loan. So to sum it up, the easiest way I can explain, this is a loan that you as a parent are taking out on behalf of your child. This would be a type of product that you would do to fill in the gap between the scholarships and grants, federal loans, any cash that we're paying out of pocket. This would be to kind of fill in the gap for whatever else we owe. Now, there are some big red flags that I just want to identify if you're someone that's considering doing this. First and foremost, this is in your name, the parent. This is not the students, your child is paying on this after. It is in your name. You are the guarantor. Oftentimes, these loans, the repayment starts immediately. Now, you can work with the individual servicer to discuss deferments and all of that. That'll be dependent on that specific servicer. But the point being, if you take out a $10,000 Parent Plus loan for Sally or Johnny, that is in your name and you are expected to repay. And as we know, student loans, they can't be charged off in a bankruptcy generally. They're not going to generally be charged off at all. You can't transfer this to your son or daughter either. Now, obviously, if your son or daughter wants to pay you back, that's between you and them, but they're not legally required. So I have worked with members in the past that they did sign up for a lot of money in Parent Plus loans. I've had a member that has $100,000 for their 2 children's Parent Plus loans. And let's just say the children are not paying mom or dad back, and mom and dad are not able to really pay these, so credit's tanked, and there's just so much risk with that, right? So again, go back to the first slide, we're talking about investment, we're talking about risk. I'm not trying to make this a sad presentation, but I just want everyone to be aware of the present risks that we don't think about, because 5 years from now, when your son or daughter is graduating or you're getting close, I don't want this to be all of a sudden the time bomb that explodes and We're like, oh gosh, I really wish I would have known this before I started this. Now, there are benefits to this, obviously, because every family dynamic is going to be different. The biggest one that you'll see if you Google this or research is that there's no like cap limits, right? So if you needed $12,000 or $15,000, the federal side that we discussed earlier, there are limits to that depending on the year of the student. For the Parent Plus loan, there isn't. Now, that could be a good thing and a bad thing because, like we just discussed, you're liable for that. So it's not a guarantee that your son or daughter will pay you back. The interest rates generally, I think right now are around 9%. So that is higher, obviously, not quite credit card territory. It is borderline personal loan territory. So there are costs to that, but there's also origination fees and other things that you will pay. I think right now origination fee just to do the loan is around 4% of the balance that you're borrowing. So that is another thing where you're paying that out of pocket regardless. So as a parent, that will one day be in this decision of having to figure out how my son or daughter is going to pay for school. If these are still around and they're built the same way as they are now, definitely something where I'm going to try to avoid this probably if I can. But you should just understand the risk. Now, that last little bullet point, we talked about other sources of funds, home equity loans. Like I said earlier, you could pay for college however you want. If you had a lemonade stand and every penny that you earn goes to that, hey, more power to you. We have members come in every single day during school years of needing to help their son or daughter pay for school, or their son or daughter come in, and we've done personal loans. We've had members pay for it on a credit card. We've done home equity loans. I'm not vouching for either one of those things. The point being is, at the end of the day, the school needs to get paid. I think there are better ways to do it. You could definitely make the argument of doing a home equity loan at 5 or 6% versus a Parent Plus loan, but there are, again, intricate risks and considerations before you should just jump to one of those paths, I guess. So I'm going to stop there just real quick because I feel like we're at the segue point. Just because there might be some questions on that. I know that's a lot of information.
I don't have any questions yet,
Cool.
but I'll give it just a minute.
Yeah, you're good. The other thing I will mention, because I thought I had it included on the slide after this, but I was wrong. The private student loan market, which is the core crux of the student loan crisis, because I've seen student loans on the private market that have rates of 18%. So they mimic credit card rates. And you have, recent college grads that are making $40,000 a year out of college, and they're expected to pay back 40 grand at 16 to 18%. Those would be, again, the last option that I would go with. Now, there are better private loans than others. So point being, like, you need to know what you're signing up for. There's a lot of variable rates. So you might get a 2-year teaser rate of 6%, but if you don't pay that off, all of a sudden it jumps to 12 or 14%. We might forget that when we're a junior of college or senior of college. And then when we get out of college, we borrowed 40,000, but now we owe 70. These are real life things that people are facing. So, and the private side, we didn't talk about this on the federal side, but most student loan forgiveness plans through employers in different industries generally are just the federal loans. So when you have these private loans, they're kind of on a boat of their own, and the deferment options and the payment options are not as fluid as what the federal side has offered. We know during COVID, like, they kind of put the halt on all interest rates, even private, I believe, but the big crux of what we're seeing with people facing, where you have people in their 60s that still have student loan debt, and it's crippling, and they'll likely never pay it off just because of the amount. Almost all of those are those private loans that the interest is still accruing, and it's still increasing the overall balance from where they started. So again, if you're going to go that route, it would be probably one of the last ways I'd go, minus using a credit card or doing something illegal, obviously, but just know what you're applying and signing up for before you put pen to paper. Alicia, if we did not get any questions, I'll just want to be considerate of time.
We have one question. So they asked, what are some trustworthy scholarship sites if you know of any offhand?
So I will find that. I do have one that I have saved. I have to find it, but I know. I think I got it from our financial education center on the scholarship article. Can you just pin that question? Because I will come back to that. I know I have it saved somewhere. I was actually kind of, if you can see me looking over to the other screen, I was actually looking for that right now. But I will, just out of sake of time, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But thank you for the question. I do want to answer that. I do think, like, there is one, just scholarships.com, I think, is one. Again, you can search these directly through the school you're applying to, because they will have their own scholarships as well. But I think FastWeb might be what it's called. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it's called. I will confirm that here when I have a moment. Maybe when we stop for questions next, I'll look through my notes here. So thank you for that question. Alicia, just with respect to time, I'm going to just keep going on, and we'll stop here shortly again to take any new questions. How to apply for the educational loans, because I think this is a question that people probably get most intimidated for when they think about filling out a FAFSA. There's so many good resources online. YouTube, there's a couple good videos of people literally going through the application. So this is a free application that is done directly online. If you go to the student aid website, studentaid.gov, it's right at the home screen as far as filling that out. Now, some important things to remember for that is the date. So the application period opens up generally on October 1st. That is, changes year to year, but that's generally what it's been. And then it usually cuts off at the end of June. So for applications for the 2027-2028 year, the cutoff is going to be June 30th. That's at least what's posted on the Student Aid Gov website. So the point being, and we'll go through the timeline, is like we can get this ball rolling early on just to give us the most time. The application, as far as what we need, so the student and the parents generally are going to have to fill it out. Now, parents are not required. This is where we get kind of into the weeds, because family dynamics are different. We might have mom and dad married, everyone lives together. We might have divorce, where maybe we have a step parent, we have blended families. It does change things kind of drastically. But for the most, let's just say single child with both parents living at home, the parents technically don't have to they don't have to fill it out. Now, this is where it gets tough, because I have friends whose parents refused. Doesn't mean that your student's not eligible for federal aid. It just means that they will not be eligible for subsidized loans. Anything that they're approved for from the through their FAFSA will be unsubsidized. There are exceptions to that rule too. If your child is not a dependent person, that would be someone that is under 24, that is either a ward of the state, they have served in the military, they have a child or other dependents, they don't have a legal guardian. And I'm not trying to not answer this, because there might be someone here that is that person that does fit, but there are exceptions to a lot of these rules. So a dependent person would be a prospective student that does rely on parent or legal guardian for some form of support. So a dependent student, it is advised that they have their parent or parents fill out the FAFSA with them. If it is a split family, if you are divorced, generally they advise whoever is more responsible for care of that child. So if, and again, this is where we get up into the weeds a little bit, but if we have a parent that has the child Monday through Friday and essentially pays for most of those things for the child, the Student Aid Gov site would recommend that that is the parent that is included on the FAFSA as, you know, the family contributor. If that parent is also remarried, or they have a step parent, they're not required to be on there unless they're remarried. They would have to fill out their information, but it's encouraged that you fill out the income information for that blended parent, if that makes sense. Because I think there was something in the chat that came through about the divorced parents. And maybe I just saw something that didn't exist, but I want to get back to the original thing, because I know we're getting probably a little confused. But the FAFSA needs to be completed by the student. If they are again have two parents that are willing to that are living together, married, they will fill that out too. And as far as what you will need, it's going to ask for your social, it's going to ask for tax returns. Now the FAFSA uses tax returns from 2 years prior, and they will ask for detailed financial information, and that would include assets. It doesn't include the house that you live in, but if you have other properties for rental, businesses, farms, investment accounts, checking account balances. I know that this sounds like a lot. I promise you, the actual form that you fill out is way more streamlined. I don't want you to be intimidated, and I also don't want you to delay, putting this off to the last minute, because again, the faster we start getting these things rolling, I think it just buys you more time, allows you to kind of explore more options in school choices for your child. This kind of ties into the independence. Sorry, I forgot this list existed, but this would be a very niche thing. But this would be if you are a student that is considered financially independent, you have some privileges. You are eligible for more federal aid because of this, but it's a very specific kind of criteria of what would classify you as a financially independent student. So like I said, at least 24 years old. If you're a veteran, it doesn't have to be all of these, obviously. If any one of these things applies to you, that would classify you potentially as a financially independent student, which would make you possibly eligible for more federal aid. And again, if you guys want more specific stuff, the studentaid.gov site does have like detailed specifics for your individual situation, because we all have different family dynamics, so it's not fair to just lump that all in. But just for sake of time and ease, I want to try to keep it as general as possible. Not, again, I apologize. If you have more specific questions, please throw them in the chat. Let's just talk about understanding the need portion, because you'll see language on the website for that, and the student aid index, which this will tie into. So student aid index, which was changed in 2024, it used to be called the EFC, which was expected family contribution. It's basically what they determine the family contribution. So from the parents, what should be expected for that household to provide for that specific child for college expenses. And it is what is calculated from the FAFSA application. So again, it's going to factor in income from the parents. It's going to factor in other benefits. If they receive Social Security or VA disability, or if they have real estate property, that, investment property. It's going to also factor in 2025, it changed. It used to factor in a number of students that are currently in college. It does factor in just household size now. It's one of the first questions that you ask. So that it just factors in all that. Now, if your student also works and has a W-2 from 2 years prior, they would factor that in there too. So I know that's probably not as common now, but again, it would factor in all the financial information for both student and the parents. If you're wondering, IRAs, 529 plans, if that was a question, if the gentleman or Mrs. that was earlier that asked that, 529 would factor into the student aid index. I don't know the algorithm of how it's calculated is kind of like a foreign language. It's kind of like when you Google how a credit score is calculated. We know generally how it is, but every single bureau is going to have their own tweaks on the algorithm. But the 529 does factor in. You'll want to, I can't answer objectively how much it affects that, but I do know that they do factor that in. That would be something that would be added onto the FAFSA application. So if the person that asked the question earlier was wondering, maybe they weren't wondering, maybe they knew the answer, just in case you're out there. So student aid index, let's just remember that. We'll keep that in the back of the mind. And then cost of attendance, because these are correlated when it comes to calculating how much financial aid a student would be eligible for. So student aid index is what your FAFSA application determines is what should be expected from the family to contribute towards the cost of school. The cost of attendance would be kind of the opposite. That's what the school itself would calculate how much a year would cost, and that would factor in tuition, books, all the supplies, food, rent, or dorm expenses. So school sets the cost of attendance. Student aid index would be what we expect the parent to contribute. And what that boils down to is how they determine the need, which is kind of the barometer of how your eligibility and the amount that you're available or able to borrow in federal loans is determined. So they would take the school cost of your prospective school, they would subtract your SAI or your student aid index, and that would determine your need. This table does an okay job. There's more nuance to it, but basically, if you look at the first two examples, just ignore the private 4-year because the public 4-year does the same thing. Public 2-year, if the student aid index is 12,000, that's what the expected family contribution is, and the cost of the school is only 12,000. This would say, hey, that student wouldn't be eligible likely for federal aid for this specific school. Now, conversely, if we look at the 4-year, this would say, hey, they're eligible for up to $8,000 in aid, and that could come from a mix of unsubsidized, subsidized, work study, a mix of that. So, and then the public, obviously the private 4-year, a lot more. The need is much higher, but there are limits to our federal loans. So this would be what would be expected. If you look at that private 4-year, 28 grand is kind of what they're telling you should anticipate you're going to have to figure out a plan for. 12,000, they're kind of assuming, which is kind of silly, but assuming not literally that the parents have that in spades ready to pay, but basically, hey, this is what we'd expect you to contribute. And that could also factor in like a Parent Plus loan. They don't necessarily specify, hey, you should just have this in cash or whatever to pay for it. But the 28,000 on that private 4-year is kind of what they're telling you, hey, student loans, scholarships, grants, you should account for trying to cover that up. Either way, if the school cost is 40 grand, we got to figure out how to pay that, or if it's 20,000 or 12,000. And again, we have all these buckets that we can look for uh, funds from, right? So that's how that is calculated. And you can have a negative student aid index if this is asked. I love that because this is something that there are obviously situations where maybe they're in poverty. There's not, there is a dire need, and that negative index would obviously make that student eligible for the Pell Grants or some of the grants that are offered through the federal government. So they do have a cutoff. I'm not exactly sure what that specific number is, and I don't know that they specify that, but there are, if your situation is like, if you're someone that has lost their job or they weren't working during that time, in 2024, technically for this period, you could have a negative student aid index, which would report that that student has the highest need, which does open the door for, different types of federal grants that they would be eligible for, which, as we said earlier, the grants we're not paying back. So I just want to go to one more slide, then I want to stop because I feel like this is a lot, and I assume there might be questions. If the student aid index is more than we can afford, again, we would expect the family contribution might be. This is kind of talking about that negative index. That's where you would have the federal Pell and other grants, but the subsidized federal loans and the work study, there are cutoffs for who is eligible for the work study and the subsidized loans as well. And then the other forms of aid that are not need-based that can be used for that student aid index, like I said, federal plus loans, they're not expecting you to have 12 grand for your son to go to the $40,000 private school, but they're basically saying, hey, I would anticipate that you, through federal unsubsidized loans or federal plus loans or cash reserves or whatever we have, you might want to plan for this amount. And then the need-based aid, which was that bottom category, I'm going to go right backwards. So the need and the SAI, think unsubsidized loans, federal plus loans, and just cash or our own income or home equity loans, whatever the need. That's where we would get our subsidized amount. We'd get our work study, our Pell Grants if we are eligible for those. I'm going to pause because I have to imagine that there are going to be questions.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Do you want to circle back on that scholarship sites?
Oh, yeah. I had, what did I say? Fast Web, I think, right? And College Board. That's the one I was thinking of. College Board, I believe they have a paid program. I would not do that. I don't think it's necessary. It's kind of like paying for Credit Karma. If you pay for Credit Karma, don't do that. Use our app instead. And then FastWeb was the other one. Again, if you have a financial education center login, go in, log into, and that would be on our Learn tab from the main website. Search college scholarships. There's a bunch of articles, but there is one referring to searching for scholarships. There's some good info and links in there too.
Yeah, I'll
Other
put that
questions?
link
Sorry.
in the chat real quick for you
Love
guys.
you for that. I am so bad with the operational side, so thank you for being my eye in the sky. I don't deserve you, but I'm glad you're here.
Anything for you, Anthony. Alrighty, so first question was, how does the FAFSA consider income of parents who are divorced? I think you kind of answered that. And how does it consider income of step parents?
Okay, so again, hopefully I answered this, but generally, and again, for your individual situation, I would still encourage you, hopefully you take some pragmatic and good advice here that you can use and empower yourself, but I still would encourage you, whether it's contacting the financial aid office at the prospective school or even contacting student aid directly, they would advise you to have whoever's more responsible or more financially responsible for that specific student to be the parent on that application. And if that parent, assuming again a split family, is remarried, you are supposed to include, they don't have to include the step parent, but they do have to include the financial information for that parent. So the application does a fantastic job of breaking it into all these categories and literally guiding you. So if you select that you are divorced and separated, it's going to ask which parent is going to be added. That person, they will then ask if you are remarried or if you are engaged. It'll ask you a huge list, or if you have other dependents, and it'll kind of open up the answers for you to select. So you can't really mess it up. But again, I think if you are, especially if it's still like a cordial with the other parent or whatever, like you guys could definitely get specific advice for your family situation. But that'd be a general guideline for a split family. I hope I answered that appropriately for you.
Perfect. Yes. Um, really quick, guys, I know it's almost 6:45. We will keep going if
Yeah,
Anthony's okay with it,
I'm good with
until
it. I
we're done
apologize.
with the content. But if you guys need to hop off, we understand. There will be a recording on this Financial Education Center, usually within about a week after we close this. So it should be
Yeah,
sometime next week.
yeah.
If you
I
need to hop
apologize, Dan.
off, we understand. Okay. Do you know what numbers are looked at on the FAFSA to calculate the SAI number?
Yeah. So again, it's going to be income for the parents. It's going to be assets. It's going to be, they'll ask you what balances do you have in your deposit accounts, if you have IRAs, if you have 529. If someone, I don't know if anyone asked this, I just thought about this. 529, because they're probably, if someone has one, they might say, is it parent, is it kid? I believe it would be parent. I'm 99% sure that that is correct, that would be an asset that the parent would put in their name on that form. I would double check that, but I feel pretty confident that that would be a parent asset. But it'd be the full spectrum of that. If you receive VA disability, or if you receive any Social Security, it would be essentially any assets or income that you have. Again, the real estate side, it's noted on the student aid website that it doesn't factor in like your home that you live in, but if you owned other properties, you would factor in just the total value of those assets, like your net worth essentially. If the student did work, again, it uses tax returns from 2 years prior. So that again might be a niche sample size, but they would include that adjusted gross income for the student borrower for that year. So in this case, 2024 would be used for this last year. I hope that answered the question.
You actually answered the next two questions with that.
Cool.
So let's see. This one, does it take into account how close the parents are to retirement?
As far as like when it's factoring like what the information that you're adding,
I'm guessing. Yep.
I don't, and I apologize. I wish I knew every answer, but I don't think it does. Again, because it's using the 2 years prior. The other thing too, this would be, again, the niche stuff. Like I said, we could spend 2 hours on this. If there are special exigent circumstances, let's say you just had a major health event and you are not currently working, but you were working 2 years ago, it does ask you, do you have any special circumstances, or circumstances that would affect, that have changed your life dynamic? It does ask that for both student and parent. So I know, especially with COVID and everything we've been through the last 6 years, this is more common probably now than ever before. But if that applies to you are able to fill that in. I don't think that has anything to do with the retirement age. If you knew you were 2 years from retirement, but it could. I don't remember. I did go through a sample FAFSA form on my own a couple weeks ago. I don't remember seeing that. But also, like I said, the answers that you give are going to prompt the questions that's asked as the next question. So I may have not selected one, but my best answer would be no. But I would still say follow up on the Student Aid Gov website and just search that specifically.
Perfect. Okay. I've got two more at the moment, and then you can move on and we'll take
Yeah.
questions again. Since they take the 2 years previous info for FAFSA, could the SAI change during the 4-year time frame, or do you only fill out the FAFSA once, or does the FAFSA need to be filled out
Every year,
each year?
baby. Every year we get to do the song and dance again, right? So great question. I know that I just probably everyone, all 100 people or whoever we have with you, just heard a little groan. Dad, if you're here, I know it's long after, but I do apologize that you had to go through that every year. Yes, you would fill it out, and that would hopefully tie into the answer of the retirement question. Though 2-year tax return, right, it might not actually overlap, but yes, you would refill this out because things change. It would be kind of crazy if they didn't have you do it. So one of the last slides, again, if you have to hop off, the call will be recorded. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I do apologize for running late. It does kind of give us a rough timeline of like a guideline of what you should follow. When should you fill this out? What should you do next? So we'll get to that. It's towards the end. I do apologize, but great question.
All right, last one for now. Are
Yeah.
all numbers for the SAI current numbers except for the tax returns?
Yeah, so like I would assume you're asking about balances in accounts and like IRAs and stuff. Um, it would be asking current balances and assets. And that's again, I did like a mock, filled one out like kind of a mock a couple weeks ago, and it did ask for current assets on that. So I hope that's what you're referring to. Is that any other?
Not at the moment.
Okay, perfect. We're going to move on again. I am just I am a very passionate person. I love meeting with members and helping them and going through a wide array of topics. So I do apologize. I get a little ahead of myself. So again, forgive me for monopolizing your time. Um, Reducing college costs. I know a lot of this might be general knowledge, but we'll just hammer these through because I think this comes back to the conversations we have with our son or daughter before they go to school. So like if we know the start saving early, what I think of is if our kids are working at 14 or 15, I'm not saying that they have to set aside money for college right off the bat. Obviously, like in a perfect world, sure they do, but they're kids. They're going to have things that they're doing, especially when they're driving and stuff. But if we can get them to understand the concept of college and the investment, I can't expect a 14 or 15-year-old to be a 30-year-old just because we have a conversation about college. But if we can get at least a little buy-in and just kind of talk through them over the years and get them to see like, oh, I should be saving money for this. Kind of like if we advise them to buy a car. Obviously, buying a car and saving for that is a lot more attractive for most kids than saving for college, right? But if we can get that ingrained in their mind, I think we can create good behaviors that kind of reinforce with the direction we're trying to go into. Take advantage of our AP courses or any PSEO, anything we can do to knock out some of these general ed requirements. I think the biggest mistake I made is that I didn't even, community college just wasn't a thing. If you did that, you were seeing kind of kids made fun of you, which is just such a silly thing. But knowing that I had to retake courses in college where I'm paying $15,000 a year that I literally took in high school just to pass a requirement, it's a tough pill to swallow. One of the classes BSU offered, God bless you, the Beavers, but it was literally a relaxation course. I paid $329 for a one credit class where we literally just napped. That's what we did. Nothing against that stuff, but if I could have just knocked that out through high school, would have been happier about it now, I can tell you. Um, can we get any like Head Start programs for the, if we know like our son or daughter, like we want to be a lawyer, we want to get into medicine, we want to get into teaching, are there any fast track courses that we can get through, again, like an AP or a PSEO or through community college, where we can kind of get a fast track to a degree where we can knock out college in 2 or 3 years? We're seeing a lot more of that now today. Digital options, right? Like there's people getting master's degrees online. I think that's so awesome because it just wasn't an option, 15 years ago. So being open-minded to all these things. And then again, when your son or daughter, or when you go to school, I don't think it's talked about enough, but are you going to be working? I know that's a lot to take on. Full-time student, you're in the most formative years of your life. There's so many other things you want to be doing. It's like your first time for most of being on your own. But can you take on that responsibility of also like working, even if it's 10 or 15 hours a week, so we can kind of manage all of the other costs? I think so often back when I was in school, kids would get like a refund for their student aid that was meant to go towards, books and food and all these things. And they were using it as a down payment on a car. They were, buying things they shouldn't have been buying, right? I think changing that mindset, having that conversation with your child, it can, it might not seem like a lot at first, but I do believe it's going to have a profound impact in the long run. This is that timeline. Sorry, I thought it was towards the end, but this is that timeline. This is, again, not what you have to do, but this would be like if you're really, if you are like that parent that whose child is going to be a senior in high school this year, or a junior, or wherever you are, this would be like a optimal timeline of how you would go about, the order of operations. So we know that you can't fill out a FAFSA right now. The cutoff for the current coming year has been already cut off. It was June 30th. But come October 1st, you can complete that FAFSA application. When you submit that, it might be a week or two until you get kind of the information back. One thing I would recommend is if you know the colleges that you are looking to go to, it will ask you that on the FAFSA, and it will send your information directly to that school, which will prompt the financial aid packages from that school. So if you are thinking U of M, Minnesota Duluth, Wisconsin, Bemidji State, it will automatically send your information, your student, all of that to that school, which will then prompt that financial aid package offer from those schools. And again, that could take weeks, it could take a month or so for those specifically, but it kind of already takes out a lot of that guesswork where you have to go in and edit that. Now, if someone's asking, I think it allows up to 20 schools, it's 15 or 20 at a time, and you can go back into the active application and adjust those schools if you decide, hey, I'm not really digging Wisconsin. I want to stay in the state of Minnesota or wherever you are in the United States. It'll actually allow you to search whatever school, community college, private universities, public universities. So if we are more proactive and we're having these conversations, getting that ball rolling, and your kid already knows, hey, they're about to start their junior year of high school, and they know, like, hey, I really think Winona State sounds awesome. And obviously that could change, but that's cool because it's already more ammo for us to use when October 1st of that following year comes. Apply to those colleges. Obviously, that'll be the next step, and then we should already be looking and applying for scholarships. Right, that is something we can actively do, and if we can pool all this money that we're able to use these grants and scholarships, it's less that we need to get through these other sources. Spring before college, so second semester, I think, for high school kids, we're going to apply for those financial aid schools that we're considering. So once we've narrowed down that school list of where we're actually thinking of going, we can work with them on those specific financial aid packages. And then when they have those results back to us, then we can shop around and say, hey, I wanted to go to St. Cloud over Winona, or I want to go to Winona over St. Cloud, but St. Cloud is just offering a better package for me. It's going to be less, less debt. They're giving me a few more scholarships because they will prompt scholarship offers through this application process. So that is a big thing, but that's where you kind of get to shop around with all of the different offers or whatever you're eligible for that specific school. And that's where, again, the need or the college cost and the student aid index will kind of generate what the school would offer as a financial aid package. We're still looking and applying for scholarships all the while. Summer before college, we're able to accept that financial aid package. So we were thinking Winona, but St. Cloud just had the best of everything. It's going to be less debt for us, at least for this first year. We'll accept that package, and that's where we actually put pen to paper. We're signing that agreement. And again, I know this has been exhaustive, but most of my generation had no idea of any of the stuff that was going on. And I got lucky because I did figure it out a couple of years in and apply for scholarships and take advantage of that money, and through the school itself. But it was just dumb luck. I should have had $100,000 in debt because I went for way too long. But these are the things where if we know all of that before we sign, doesn't mean we did everything the right way, but at least we understood, hopefully, some of the gravity of what we were doing. And then, you're going to orientation. So in a few weeks, the kids will be here in BSU and all over. And then you're going to school. So the disbursement check, generally first or second week, I think is where it came out. That's where that refund check which would go towards the out-of-pocket expenses. Big thing with that is we need to be smart with that. It's kind of like I think of when I see an 18-year-old get $5,000 from graduating high school, and it's like, hey, what's the plan with this? Because we could use this, and it gets spent before the summer's over, just on kind of discretionary spending. That's another conversation. Like, hey, Jane or John, you're going to get some money that's meant to pay for your food plan or your living arrangement or whatever it is. Let's make sure that we are using that for that purpose, because if we're not, that means we have to pay for it somewhere else. And mom and dads out there, you're probably like, yeah, they text me and say I need to send money to their account because they need to feed themselves. So it's the total package with that. Any questions that were prompted, I guess, from those two slides?
Not at the moment.
One other thing, anecdotal, again, I'm not trying to spend so much time talking, but this is another thing that I feel like kids do not take advantage because it's not sexy, it's not attractive, it's not cool. A big reason why, on top of like applying for scholarships and grants in my sophomore, junior year, et cetera, I went for 5.5 years. I'm not embarrassed to say it. And I don't currently use my degree, so it's kind of silly that I'm sitting here chatting with you. But I learned so much, and I look back and reflect that I wish I could have talked to myself at 18 or 16 or 17. But the thing that saved my soul the most is I was a RA, or a resident advisor, in the freshman dorm for my sophomore, my junior, and my senior year. This is almost across the board in Minnesota for the public schools, but I got free room and board and a free meal plan. So the only loans I had for those 3 years were for my actual tuition, and I was able to subsidize some of that from those scholarships and grants. So like I said, I think 5.5 years should have been about $80-some thousand or close to 90 grand. I think I got out with about $23,000 in total. So again, it wasn't the attractive thing because all my friends at college were living off campus and having fun, and I was living in the dorms until I was 22 years old. But I'm so glad I did that. And that is something that, BSU especially, they're starving for people to want to do that. And I think that's just such a cool benefit if you can swallow the pride of living on campus and doing, some of the work that's accompanied with that. So we're getting kind of the summary point, but borrowing wisely, these are pretty staple things across the board, whether it's student loans or, consumer side too, but borrow what you need. Like if you get extra, I know this is not what people are actually doing, but don't take it or apply it back to the loan because it's just money that you're going to be paying back eventually. If you're a student and you're able and you have the capacity to work, the best utility we have is our income source. Again, whether it's student loans or whether it's our regular bills that we have to pay. And this is rare, but if you were able to, theoretically, let's say you had an unsubsidized and subsidized loans, that's what you have. You don't have any other loans. It's all federal, but we have unsubsidized and subsidized. If you can pay on the unsubsidized during school, because the interest is accruing, again, you're saving it from a rainy day later on. So it's again probably not as likely as what we love in a perfect world to be great, but if you were able to, you will not regret that when you get to be your mid-20s or your 30s and you're not carrying around all this excess debt. Little tip in here: try to borrow no more than 90 to 100% of your expected starting salary, and then there's a table that corresponds with that. That first number, so $25,000 borrowed, I'll do the math. I think it was around 33,000 that you would pay back. So, if you follow through on the 10-year plan, most of the federal loan programs are 10-year plans, but with all of the alterations and the deferments and forbearances, like we still have, members and people in the U.S. that took out 10-year loans that are on year 30. So you could potentially pay these back for the rest of your life. And I want to avoid that for everyone, everyone in the world, but everyone on this chat especially. So we talk about paying on those unsubsidized loans. It's really just to avoid, just having a lifelong chain of payments that we have to keep paying on for the rest of our life. And matching, like, again, back to one of the first slides, if we know like the trajectory of the career or discipline we're going into has at best, if everything goes according to plan, when we get out into the workforce immediately after college, if we know we're only going to be making, 39,000, and I don't mean only, but like, let's just say that what that is, and the investment's going to cost us, 60, 70, $80,000, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but I think it's worth a conversation of like, hey, do you understand the ramifications? Obviously, we'd like to think that there's potential to double or triple that salary so that, yeah, the first 2 years are rough. I understand that some fields, we got to get our foot in the door and kind of earn our keep, and the growth can be there, but we do need to at least take that into consideration when we're deciding the school and what we're going to be doing as far as a career choice. So kind of, again, in the theme of summary, we understand the commitment, how serious it really is. I didn't mean for this to be a drag or anything. It's really just to empower and inform you guys of like, hey, this is a bigger picture than what it's kind of been taught to us, on the surface level when we Google or we watch YouTube or what we learn in high school and stuff. So there are credit implications. Obviously, student loans, whether you're the student that's borrowing or it's a parent plus loan, they're reporting to credit. So there are financial implications for that. Credit rating, it could affect not only student loan rates, but it could affect, your ability to buy a car, buy a house. So it's not just about the schooling. These are not things that generally can be discharged through bankruptcy either. So I think a lot of people over the last few years have thought, oh, I'll just file bankruptcy. Unfortunately, that's not going to change the student loan, deal for you. And I wish it was different. Maybe I don't know that I want people to file bankruptcy, but we want to avoid ever having to even have that thought in our mind. So this is our, again, summary of like everything that we would want to take into consideration to be successful. Are we saving money? Like, do we have cash? Because obviously if you could pay, and again, if you can do that, fantastic. I know that is probably not realistic for the average American, but if we could and we had the money available and we could pay for college, one of the first questions, should I take a loan or pay for my first year? I'm always going to side with the paying your way through it, paying cash, not taking the debt. But there is a lot nuance to that question. Grants, scholarships, hammer it. If there's money out there, we want to get our hands on it. And it's not to be selfish. It's that people don't apply for a lot of these things. Federal student loans would be the best. If we have to borrow, that is where we want the most of our debt to be because it's going to have the best interest rates. If we can get subsidized loans, if we qualify for it, we know that interest is not accruing. Unsubsidized, yes, the interest is accruing. If we can pay on that during school, great. If not, it's not the end of the world, but do understand that loan balance will be higher when it comes time to repay it. choice of school and our career choice should be compatible. Make sure that the investment is worth the risk. We want to graduate. We want to graduate on time. Don't disparage those that take longer. I turned out okay. I have a $23,000 paperweight. I wouldn't change it. Maybe I'd change some of the financial side, but I do want, if my purpose of doing that all incorrectly was to be here with you guys and I help one person, I'm good with that. I mean that. And then explore all of our options. So let's not just fall in love with the first private loan if we have to go down that road, or if you're contemplating a Parent Plus loan. Really run the gamut on all of these available options, run the numbers, do the math, ask the experts. If it's coming to Affinity Plus, this isn't our breadbasket as far as like facilitating the student loans, but most of us have been through it. And like I said, I work with this on a regular basis with members that have questions, but there's so many great resources, both through the schools that you're going to be attending, even the student aid and FAFSA, reaching out to them for specific questions, and all the resources available to us online, right? So don't just put all your eggs in one basket and fall in love with the first decision. Obviously, we know kind of our priority list, but don't be afraid to really look at every possible outcome and possibility for you. So I'm basically summarizing the same thing. I'm going to turn it over to Alicia. I just want to, I'm going to flip the slide. She's going to plug the Financial Education Center. I really do apologize for running late. Thank you all for so much for coming and asking the questions. I'll hang out for a bit. If there are more questions, I'm good for as long as I need to be to answer any questions. But Alicia, if you got to go too, that's fine. But I'm going to turn over to Alicia just to discuss the Financial Education Center.
All right, guys, I know we're a little over time, and that was a lot of info, but it was a lot of really, really great info. So thank you, Anthony, for doing all of that. And I know the people that are left really appreciate it. So yeah, I want to talk about the Financial Education Center. So I sent a link earlier to a specific article, but this is a really great resource, you guys. It's completely free, not just to members, but to anybody. So you can share this with your friends, family, whoever. You can sign up for it to like save your videos and things under a free profile, but there's courses, there's articles, there's just videos. Our events, under that events tab that you see, you will see the recording for this and the ones that we've done throughout the year so far. And it's really just a really cool resource overall. I mean, there's a ton of topics in there. That one that you see on your page is obviously continuing education, so talking about college. This week they're talking about retirement on there is kind of the highlight. So there's different topics every week, which is just really, really, really cool. So
may I just plug one more thing too? If there's questions, I'll answer them. But I'm going to be kind of taking over the webinar series moving forward. We won't be having one next month. We're going to kind of revamp some things and look at plotting out the next 3 to 6 months. Please, if you have topics that you would love for us to cover, I want this to be beneficial. Obviously, this is a very specific one, but if there's other things that you want us to cover, I would love for this to be a collaborative thing. I really appreciate your time tonight. And again, I do apologize for taking longer for those that remained on the call the whole time. Alicia, if there's other questions, I want to get to them. I'm fine staying on as long as I needed, but
yeah, I don't have any questions right now, just a thank you. There's
cool.
somebody that said thank you for all the information. Oh, here's a question. Do different Affinity Plus branches have folks who specialize in college planning, specifically to look at SAI situations located in St. Paul, and they are a member?
So we don't, just full transparency, we don't have anyone, I guess, that I would classify as specializing in college planning. I think I have met with people in my own capacity to discuss all of the components of planning for college, factoring in the financial side and just advising. Our investment advisors would also kind of have a branch in that with the 529 plans and just the overall financial planning conversation. I think with the SAI, if you're saying, hey, I found this out, this is what we are eligible for, and you're looking for kind of a bird's eye view of maybe advising like how to navigate, what else we could cover, I don't want to speak to a specific branch, but I do know that we have, like, that is something that I have talked to members about. Now, if you have more specific questions on the federal aid side of things, with what your child or what you were offered, that might have to be directed to them, because I certainly don't want to pretend to be a federal aid employee or anything like that. But I do know we have employees that do this type of have these types of conversations. But if it's more specific, like specifically student aid issues or questions on that, it might be something that would be better directed somewhere else. But I would still want to have a conversation with you before I totally dismiss you and say I can't help you. I think we definitely could at least have a conversation. There's no risk in that.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to go to your local branch and ask around because each branch is a little bit different. Every individual branch, they have people that specialize in different things and have
Yeah.
different things that they've specialized in the past. So it doesn't hurt to go to your local branch and be like, hey, do you have anybody that would be good at this? And of course, we can advise. We're not going to tell you what to do because it depends on your situation. Um, but yeah, even just your financial aid office, a lot of colleges offer people that walk you through this process as well now because
Yeah.
they know it's a little complicated and a lot of moving parts. To speak also to what Anthony said about we want to hear your ideas. There will be a survey after we close this out tonight. We highly encourage you to take that because we do actually really look at that feedback and we take it into consideration for future events. So I don't have any other questions on the
No.
docket right now, Anthony.
Cool. And I know you're in St. Paul, that person that asked the question. I'm in Bemidji. I know that doesn't help you physically, but you can definitely get my contact info, I'm sure, relatively easy, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you and answer questions that I'm able to answer. So don't feel like that has the limit. I have a phone, I have a way to reach out to video, and I'm more than happy to help if I can. So and just to reiterate, please fill out the survey. I love to know things I can improve on, topics that we can cover. We'll read every single one of them. That's a promise. So would love to hear feedback so we can make this better for you guys moving forward.
Perfect. Well, there's no other questions. So
Cool.
thank you, everybody that stuck around. We really appreciate it. And we're very glad that you guys got this information. And hopefully we'll see you at the next seminar.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your night.